And again, I'm going to ask you, if you've just joined me on any of the social media platforms, please let me know who you are and where you're from. It's also helpful to me to know what background you've got in iridology. If I know I've got mostly beginners, I will keep things at a beginner level. If I know I've got mostly more advanced people, we will take it a little bit deeper. Today, we are going to be talking again about iridology, the science of iridology, but especially the history of the development of iridology. Really important for us to know this because it explains why there are so many differing opinions out there when it comes to iridology. And just want to encourage you to play with me in my sandbox, make comments, and share back and forth. When I ask a question, give me answers. When I ask for interaction, the more you play with me, the more you're going to get from me. And we've got someone from Bristol. Excellent. Bristol in England, correct? All right, so why do we need to know the history of iridology? Well, again, it's an evolving science. It is actually a very young science, as sciences go, and it is constantly evolving. And so we need to keep up with the research. Now, the sad part of this is that a lot of iridologists have not kept up with the research. And this makes it very difficult for the science to keep moving forward. Sherry, good to have you with us on Facebook. Thanks for being there. I would like to take a moment to introduce myself formally before we get started, so you will understand and see that I'm speaking from experience on this evolution thing. I got into holistic health over 4 decades ago. I know I don't look a day over 19. I'm just kidding. Over 4 decades ago. And when I started, I got into iridology, herbology, nutrition, all kinds of things. Back then, the only iridology that was available was the Bernard Jensen style of iridology. And this, that's what I did. I studied that and I used it for about 10 years. And then I got frustrated, and I'll get more into that story a little later on. Over the decades that I've been involved in holistic healing, I have become a master herbalist, a certified iridologist. I am now one of only 5 level 3 IPA certified iridologists in the world. I have created and taught many different classes. I've got nutrition credentials as well. I've written many books, including the Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, The Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Textbook. Now, most of those books were self-published and self-distributed and are out of print. The only one that is still in print, or is because it's the newest one, is the Dynamic Iridology Textbook, and that currently is only available to my students. I've also taught and created many courses, Herbology Level 1, which was 20 hours of practical usage of commercially prepared herbs. Herbology Level 2, which was how to understand herbal formulations and then how to use them for things other than what the front of the label said you could use them for. I've also, for a while, was a certified prenatal educator and taught prenatal classes. And I also now have designed and taught the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, which is an IPA-approved iridology course. Sherry on Facebook is asking, would optometry be trained in some capacity in the science? No, optometry does not do anything with iridology, not a thing. They would recognize things on the retina, which we don't work with at all. They will recognize changes on the surface of the eye, like the cornea and perhaps the sclera, but they do not look at the things that we look at in the iris. Just to let you know, the next Dynamic Iridology course will be starting on June 2nd, and there'll be more details towards the end of our time together. I am also a proud member of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutrition Practitioners and the Alberta Herbalist Association, a professional member of each of those. And I love being associated with these groups because they do require that we constantly do upgrading, that we are constantly doing continuing education. So it helps to keep the skills sharp, right, and fresh. All right, let's look at some iridology things. We know that iridology was rooted, or the actual origins, not just 150 years ago, but way beyond that. It goes right back to Egypt, India, China, and Greece. We know that this science evolves, and we know that all science evolves. I want you to think for a minute that, not in my lifetime, I'm not that old, the earth was thought to be flat. Well, we now know that it's round. And it was a scientific development, watching that ship come over the horizon on the ocean. The earth must be round because I saw the top of the mast before I saw the ship, right? And so there are still some people who believe that the earth is flat. They have not kept up with the research. Not sure what's up with that. But it is true that all science evolves. And whenever a science starts, there is always change, because science isn't the art of answers. It's the art of asking questions and making discoveries. And we want iridology to continue to evolve. We want more research. We want to understand more and more about what the eyes can tell us. Do you agree with me on that? That we don't want this to stop developing. We want to have more information. We want to understand this better. We want to know how it works, why it works, and what it can tell us. If you agree with me, give me a yes in the comments. And Peggy says yes. Peggy is one of the grads of my course. Love to see my students here. Fabulous. Let's go right back to the modern day roots. And oh my goodness, Agrency, is that how you say your name on Instagram? Thanks for being there. And you gave me a yes as well. So this is excellent. And so has Katja. Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad you agree with me that this needs to keep developing. Let's go back to the roots of the modern time. And that was with Ignetz Van Patchlight. Most of you have heard the story. An 11-year-old boy catches or traps an owl or a hawk, notices a black line, or the bird is injured or gets injured in the process. Ignetz notices a black line in the owl's eye, and this black line apparently disappears as the bird, we'll call the bird an owl, gradually is restored to health. We want to thank Ignetz for being inquisitive, but we really need to ask the questions of the validity of an 11-year-old boy's scientific statement here, okay? How did he get this bird to sit still, especially a wild bird of prey kind of thing, to actually see the eyes up close, right? We also need to know that animals' eyes are very different. The surface of their eye is not the same as the human eye. It's a different structure to the iris. And maybe Ignetz did see a line, although that would be very strange because the surface of an owl eye doesn't have the fiber structure of the human eye. It's completely smooth. And so that would mean that there was an actual split in the iris that then healed up. So because the surface of an owl's eye is different from a human's eye, we can't extrapolate from one species to the next that it would absolutely happen that way. What we want to pay attention to here is that whatever Ignetz saw made him curious. And we love that because that's what spurred him on to actually become a medical doctor and to do more research and to start the science of iridology, start solidifying and investigating. Ignetz's, this I think was an uncle or cousin, later on said this: even August von Patchlight recognized years later that Ignetz was looking at an owl's eyes and not that of a human, and that he did not have the proper equipment to prove what had been recorded in stories. And Ellen Tart Jensen goes on to say it is time for iridology to move forward based on sound research rather than hearsay. So again, Ignetz became a medical doctor. He laid the foundation. He created one of the first iridology maps. All he had at his disposal was a 2-power magnifying glass, right? Just a 2-power magnifying glass. And that's what he started with. His challenge was he couldn't understand why some people with a particular marking had symptoms and other people with the same marking or a similar marking didn't have the same symptoms. We now understand that most of what we see in the iris is genetic potential, not absolute genetics, right? So we see a mark in the eye and it suggests an increased risk for something, but it's not a guarantee that risk is going to be there. Then we move on to Pastor Nils Liljequist, and you want to note that most of these men are in Central Europe, and they were not talking to each other. They didn't have the internet, they didn't have telephones, they were not talking to each other, they were working independently. Pastor Liljequist noted correctly that the density of the fiber in the eye correlates to the resilience or the overall resistance to disease processes. So when we see an eye like this one on the left-hand side of your screen versus the one that's in the middle of the screen, and I'll just move this closer for my Instagram friends, there you go. The fiber structure in this image on the left is much tighter, much higher thread count per square inch, as compared to the image on the right, where we've got a lot of gaps and a lot of openings. So the image on the left reflects a stronger, more resilient constitution. This person is more easily able to resist disease processes if they take care of their body and if they nourish it properly. The image on the right is someone who will have to work harder to resist disease processes and breakdown. They're going to have to be much more vigilant with their nutrition, with their lifestyle. And so we now understand that fiber structure gives us some key information about how the person could respond to different therapeutic approaches. Now, the person on the left could end up very ill. We're not saying they will never be ill. They could end up very ill, especially if they don't take care of their body, right? Pastor Liljequist also felt that eyes would change due to toxic exposure or medication or things like that. But we now know that even these little bits of pigment that we see in an eye have a genetic base. Even if there's a big wash of pigment over the eye, that is genetic. It is not due to toxicity. It's not due to exposure to something. These are things that have been given to this person as a genetic legacy, if you will. And those pigments teach us more about where the problems may want to originate and where the problems may want to settle in the body. Then we have Pastor Emmanuel Falca. He started laying the foundation again for others to build on by defining the constitutions. You know, the 3 basic constitutions that we have are lymphatic, hematogenic, and biliary. And then we have many subtypes from there as well. He taught iridology, and there's an institute in Germany that is named after him called the Falca Institute, and they still do teach Germany. And I believe they teach naturopathy and homeopathy as well. Rudolf Schnabel, he researched pigments and pupil tonus. So he was interested in those little colored freckles we see in the eye. He wanted to understand, why are they there? Why do some people have them and some people don't? What can they teach us? And he also noticed that pupils aren't necessarily round. And if the pupil is not round, what does that teach us? He was one of the first to actually use a microscope to examine the iris. He went on to say, it was no easy task, and those who believe or would like to believe that handling iridoscopy, which is what they used to call iridology, can be learned within a few days, weeks, or even days, are mistaken and do a disservice to a good cause. This is really important to understand. Now, many of these researchers were medical doctors as well. They had a sound understanding of the body. It is absolutely critical that we as iridologists also have a solid foundation in anatomy and physiology. When we have that, it makes it so much easier to learn iridology and to take it to a much deeper level. This is Joseph Unger. I wish I'd met this man. Doesn't he just look like the grandpa you wish you had? I love his smile. I love his round cheeks. He just looks so sweet. I just want to reach in and give him a hug. He was a student of Schnabel. He became a naturopath, and he was concerned that there was a lot of different languages, a lot of different verbiage being used in iridology, and he wanted to unify that. He wanted to make it that we all use the same words. He also was extremely ethical. He knew that students were reading books and accepting the printed word about iridology before adequate research was completed. He refused to publish his work until it had been analyzed and reviewed by his professional peers. Now, this is really important, the idea of students accepting the written word when there might not have been any research behind it. One of the things that really rocked my world early on, well, probably 8 or 9 years into iridology, was learning that one of my holistic health heroes, I owned all of her books, and she talked about nutrition and herbology and iridology. She had a really beautiful book about iridology, but she admitted that the before and after pictures in her book were not legitimate, that they had done the before photos, and she said we were up against a deadline to get our book published, to get everything to the printer. And so we used color filters to create the after photos because we knew what would happen. So we doctored the photos. That broke my heart, because to me, that means I can't trust those photos. And that is still going on today. And you can see it in some of the before and after photos that people are producing. This is Joseph Deck. He was dedicated as an iridology researcher. He pioneered iridology photography, and he was an instructor as well. Theodore Kriega said, I hope that a later generation will succeed in establishing a single uniform system. In spite of zealous efforts, these have so far not succeeded. Now, Kriega was a student of Unger, Deck, and Schnabel. He had 3 of the greatest initial iridology researchers as teachers. He felt that iridology was an absolutely fabulous assessment tool, and that it needed to be used with other assessment tools. So urine analysis, hands, fingernails, tongue, feces, whatever other methods a person had of doing assessments, he felt it should be combined. Then we have Bernard Jensen. How many of you have heard of Bernard Jensen? If you've heard of Bernard Jensen, put Jensen in the comments. Bernard Jensen is the father of modern iridology in North America. Now, we love Dr. Jensen. We love him because he kept things going, right? Look at when he was living. And so during the Cold War, when there was still research going on in Europe, but that information wasn't being allowed to come to North America, Jensen took the foundation he had and he kept it alive. He basically kept iridology alive in North America, but he didn't have access to the new research. So it kind of got stuck. And he taught what he knew. And I've heard that he too was a brilliant man. I never had the opportunity to meet him. Brilliant, kind, gentle, smart, good, just a wonderful healer in many ways, and in every way. But the research didn't continue. And so then in 1980, Harry Wolff, who is a North American born German, got a hold of one of the Joseph Deck books. Now, the Deck books were written in German, and Harry could read German. He started studying this, and it was like, oh my goodness, this makes sense. And so he started teaching the Joseph Deck iridology. Right about that same time, he connected with Bill Cardona, who was my constitutional teacher, and they together started promoting iridology in a constitutional format. Now, I had studied, of course, Jensenian iridology before I connected with Bill Cardona to learn constitutional. Nowadays, we really have Jensenian, Rayid, which is sort of an emotional personality iridology, and constitutional iridology. Those are the three most common styles that you will find in the world now. And we can include, there's many people, not just the Denny Johnson form of Rayid, but there's many people that have an emotional iridology that they are promoting. When we look at Jensenian iridology, it was taught originally by Bernard Jensen. And he taught that the iris changes when the body changes. Does this sound like one of those early researchers we met? That healing lines will pop into the eyes, that lacuna shape and size will change. He also taught that you could do an iris reading with no background. You could just sit down, look at a person's eyes, tell them what was wrong with them, and then tell them what they needed to do. Traditional Jensenian iridologists have a very different style from modern Jensenian iridologists, because Ellen Tart Jensen, who is Bernard's daughter-in-law, took Bernard's work and has updated it to be compliant with the constitutional theories of iridology. So if you were studying Bernard Jensen, you've got the old stuff that is stuck 50 or 60 years ago. If you're working with Ellen Tart Jensen, you've got the modern version of the Jensen style. Rayid iridology teaches that emotional traits are genetic and revealed by markings in the irides. And readings may be done cold. Information can be gathered from the irides and may be combined with personal and/or family history information for interpretation. This was founded by Denny Johnson, and it's continued with Jim Burgess, and I believe John Andrews in England is doing a lot with this as well right now. This is an interesting thing because it can teach us about the emotional lessons that we are supposed to learn as we look at iridology in this way. Constitutional iridology originated with Joseph Deck and others. It's used by medical doctors in Italy, Germany, and Russia. And as a matter of fact, in Russia, you have to be a medical doctor to learn iridology. Correlative medical studies are being done. There was some fascinating research just released a few years ago, linking a particular iris marker to an increased risk of the MTHFR defect, for instance. Constitutional teaches us that the eyes are a reflection of the genetic structure, and I would add function, of the body. And constitutional is the foundation of the course that I teach, which is I call dynamic iridology. Constitutional iridology, this is a huge difference from the Jensenian style. This teaches us that iridology does not give us answers. It teaches us what questions to ask. When I do an iris assessment, I don't say, your eyes tell me you have this problem, because we're not allowed to diagnose or prescribe. But I can use those same markings and I can say, your eyes suggest there may be a challenge in this area. Can you tell me if there's a personal or family history in that direction? Do you have any symptoms in that direction, right? The iris and this other iris and sclera changes may continue to be visible with time, revealing areas that may need support, but these changes are not influenced by diet. They are not influenced by cleansing. They aren't influenced by a magic herbal potion. They are genetically programmed, just the way my hair has not always had this much gray in it. That change has a strong genetic programming, right? Background information is important. We do not do readings cold. We want to know about our client. We want to create that connection. We're always asking, is there a personal or family history of? Your eyes suggest this could be an area that could be challenging to you. Do you have any symptoms there? Do you have any history there? So I started learning iridology first in 1979, and constitutional iridology had not yet reached Canada, and it was not widespread in the US because 1980 is when Harry and Bill started doing their thing with iridology. So I studied and embraced what was available to me, and that was Bernard Jensen's work. But I started to get frustrated with it after about 5 years, because I would look at an eye like this and I would say, you have a problem here and here and here, and every one of these lesions in the Jensenian vernacular was a current problem that was happening right now. And I would teach my clients about diet and about lifestyle and about herbs and outline really good programs for them. And we would check their eyes every appointment, like for 6 months or a year or 18 months. And we saw no differences, none whatsoever. So after about 10 years, so 5 years of getting frustrated, 5 years of doing Jensen and 5 more years of getting frustrated, I was just about ready to walk away from it because I never saw healing lines. These are not healing lines. If you've got that Jensen background, these are not healing lines. The iris is made up of layers of fibers. So when that top layer of fiber has an opening, we are simply looking at the next layer of fiber down below. Right? These fibers have always been there. I was taught that when we had an eye like this that had a very uneven pigmentation in it, that this body was full of toxins, that they needed to be cleansed, and that these eyes would turn blue. And we cleansed, and we fasted, and we took herbs, and we did enemas, and we did all kinds of things, and never once did I see an eye turn blue. The teachers who taught me had before and after pictures that looked convincing, but like I mentioned about that book, the lesions, the colors, well, now that I understand photography, there was changes in the equipment they used, in the lighting settings, and that would affect the color and the appearance of the pigment. Lesions, as they called them, did look smaller, but we weren't accounting for pupil size. That when the pupil gets smaller, lesions, or lacuna, as they are properly called, get narrower. When the pupil gets big, it pushes those fibers and the lacunae will appear wider. But back then, I didn't know anything about photographic technology. And so I was just thinking that I was stupid. I was doing everything wrong, or that this iridology thing was just smoke and mirrors. And so I was just about ready to walk away from iridology and not do it anymore when the opportunity presented itself for me to learn constitutional iridology. What had happened is I saw an article written by Bill Caradonna that had contact information. I wrote away to it because this is way before the internet, folks. They sent me back a brochure of what learning materials they had available. I ordered all of their VHS videotapes. If you remember what a VHS videotape is, if you've ever actually watched something on VHS videotape, I want to say VHS in the comments. Right. Oh, some of you, yeah, right on. I love it. Love it. Yeah. So I still have those videotapes. I studied them. Voraciously. I learned from them. They were produced by Harry Wolf. And then I later brought Bill Caradonna to Canada to teach a certification class. We did that twice. And what I learned was that everything in the eye teaches us about inherent predispositions. I love this, that so many of you know what a VHS videotape is. That makes me smile. All right. And so I learned that these markings in the eyes are passed down through the generations, and they may be reflecting things back as far as 3 or 4 generations. So when we see these markings, we are never going to say, you have a problem here. We're going to ask, is there a personal or family history of a problem in this direction? Pigments are not the accumulation of toxins. They are simply melanin in the eye. But depending on the actual color of the pigment and depending on where that pigment is sitting in the eye, we understand which organ wants to be out of balance and how it wants to influence other organs. We are not going to cleanse this pigment out. It is a part of this person's genetic makeup. Pigments can develop over time, just the way we can get freckles on our skin over time, right? And so we can accumulate this, again, under the influence of genetic cues from other organs. Constitutional iridology teaches us to look for patterns and to understand the interrelationship of organs. And we always need to ask the client, not only what are their symptoms, what would they like our help with, but we also need to ask them, what are they already doing for their health? We could, using old Jensenian models, nitpick this eye to bits so this person has absolutely no hope left. Or if this person came in with a certain set of symptoms, we could focus on just the markings that correlate to that symptom, which means we have to understand the markings. We have to understand what's going on in their body to understand which markings are important. And then we can focus on explaining what these markings teach us about what's going on. All right. And so it gives us the opportunity to teach and support and build, to acknowledge the good things they're doing and to encourage them to improve other things that could be helpful for them. Old iridology says, with this eye, for instance, that this person has parasites, that this person is probably under a lot of stress and is having a nervous breakdown or will be soon. Modern iridology, constitutional iridology, says this person lives in their sympathetic nervous system. They respond acutely to stress, and therefore we need to find out if they're doing anything in this direction yet, but they may need some nutritional support for their nervous system. Maybe we need to teach them some stress coping skills as well. These lines do not mean parasites. They simply augment what these lines mean, that the nervous system wants to run overtime in a stress mode for this person. This is the eye of an Asian woman in her mid-30s. Her concern was infertility. The fertility clinic had been unable to help her. One key thing is noted when, my notes are kind of cryptic here. One key thing I noted was the contraction furrows. So when I added these contraction furrows to other markings that I see in the eyes, I suspected she might have problems methylating her B vitamins. I can't diagnose that. I don't have the ability to do that, but I suspected it. And what that means when someone's trying to get pregnant is if they're consuming folic acid and it's not methylated, it can build and create other issues, and it's not helpful to them at all. If they're building folic acid and not the methylated form of it, it can actually compromise fertility as well. I also suspected from this early beginning of a lipemic diathesis that she might have liver enzyme issues that would affect her ability to metabolize carbohydrates. So I asked her if she'd ever been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Notice I didn't say she had type 2 diabetes. I asked her if anyone had ever given her that diagnosis, and she said yes. Then I asked her, how frequently do you have a period? And she said every 90 days. Well, in my brain, I'm thinking that sounds like polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, if I had been using the old style of iridology, I would not have arrived at that. I would have simply thought that her cholesterol was out of balance. I would have thought she had parasites, and I would have thought she was under a lot of stress. None of that makes sense, really, for PCOS and infertility. So with how I was able to assess her iris And the questions her iRides taught me to ask, it helped me to understand what we needed to do and how we needed to work. We needed to get her the methylated B vitamins. We needed to get her some various forms of liver support. We absolutely needed to fix her diet because she was a type 2 diabetic and the doctors had only given her metformin. They had done no nutrition coaching with her. We very quickly got her down to cycles that were roughly 30 to 35 days long. We got her ovulating really well. It did take her 18 months to conceive. She had a very healthy pregnancy. They told her, well, you had type 2 diabetes before you got pregnant. You will have gestational diabetes. She didn't. She actually delivered her baby in 3 hours from start to finish, which is a little on the fast side, but healthy baby. And so I would not have been able to arrive at those conclusions without understanding constitutional iridology. So what does this mean? What do I think the future of iridology is? As long as there is good research being done, and as long as iridology instructors are willing to adopt and teach the new knowledge, iridology will begin to gain respect as a valid assessment tool. If we as an iridology community persist in hanging on to disproved and outdated and ineffective teachings of the past, iridology will come under more fire as quackery. The choice is ours. We can either get current and stay up to date with the science, or we can stay in the past and cripple the science. So having said all of that, I would love to take a moment to introduce you to my iridology course, the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System. And we won't spend too long on this. This is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. This is for practitioners who want to be able to create rock-solid programs in their client sessions, and who want to be able to create programs that will engender loyalty and get results for their clients. So important. I asked my grads some questions to find out, I want to know how my students have been thinking. And this is Karen Choate. I asked her, how has learning constitutional iridology helped you in your business? She said, it has helped me to understand the relationships between different organs and organ systems more in depth. Iridology also gives me an advantage of seeing the potential for different genetic traits and qualities that may be underlying. By observing the constitution, for example, you can extrapolate how the person's body will likely respond to applications of healing methods. Therefore, it has helped me to expand my knowledge and increased efficiency at providing more precise recommendations for health-oriented options. Now, Karen is a CNHP, and she specializes in gut health. Just a little side note here, and then I want to tell you some more stories, I think. Do I? No, maybe this is it. This is it, folks. Yeah, we're almost done. If you are interested in getting more information about the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course, I am holding a webinar on Wednesday, May 18th from 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Peggy in the comments of the webinar says, best course and teacher I've ever done. It's helped my health and many others. Thank you, Judith. Well said, Karen. Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate that. If you want more information about the course, shoot me a direct message, shoot me a PM, or reach out to me if you're with me on chat. Let me know that you're interested, and I will make sure to send you the registration link for this webinar. No obligation, just come and hear what you get. Come and hear about the amazing support I offer. And I feel like I'm being humble when I say amazing, because the support doesn't end with the class. And so if you're interested, let me know. Let me know, and I will send you that link. So there we have it. There is the history of iridology. We've looked at the evolution of it. We've looked at why we need to keep current. Can you tell me the cost of the course? Dawn, I will private message you. All right. I'll pull your email address. I'll send you an email, and we'll make sure you get that information. And I would love to chat with you a little bit more about the course as well. So there we go. I've made a note to reach out to you. Oh, there you go. Yes. Okay. I just added you to my database the other day. I remember your email address. Fabulous. Fabulous. Anybody else have any questions or comments they would like to make? I know there's a bit of a lag with all of the different tech. Are you good? Well, I know you're good. Do you have what you need for about this right now? Amazing. Okay, so we're looking good here. Thank you so much for being with me today. I truly appreciate it. Dawn, I will reach out to you later today, and we'll talk about the course and get you the information you need. And I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks for being here. Bye for now.